And thanks for tuning in to Morning Live once again. Now, we are discussing last week's job summit, and I'm in conversation with Sandile Swana from the Wits School of Governance. And just talking about, some of the outcomes from that particular summit. 275,000 jobs will be created. That was one of the concrete outcomes of the summit, and one that many people were quite optimistic about. What was your take on it?
The number that has been put forward is wrong. Why do I say the number is wrong? If at this point in time, using the expanded definition of unemployment, of the unemployed, there's 9.6 million people who are already unemployed. So if you say you wanted to eliminate that backlog over 10 years, then it would require you to create about 960,000 jobs. You are offering 275 to address this backlog. So meaning that the backlog will not go anywhere if we are creating 275,000 jobs. Secondly, the number of people that are entering the job market for the first time is between 600 and 700,000 per annum. So when you're looking at why are we not making progress, we're first of all creating less number of jobs to reduce the backlog. Secondly, we are not even creating enough space for those who are entering the job market for the first time. So when you talk especially about colored and black children, it is realistic to anticipate that either they will start a job in their late 20s or they will never work at all. That is where we are. There are not enough jobs. The South African economy is exceptionally small relative to the population.
But that's an untenable situation. And the statistics, by the way, do bear this out, where they tell us that 52.4% of the youth in this country are unemployed. And we're looking at an absorption rate of 12.2%.
Yes. Just to go back to some of the issues that you opened the show with, for instance, the role of education institutions. Let's not just talk about universities in general. You must remember that the standard of training of our artisans, let's start there, the technical colleges, what used to be called the technical colleges, FET colleges. The standard of those people, when we trained them on an international basis, they were almost without equal in terms of competency. Even if a youngster left here after completing his apprenticeship and trade test, went to Britain, he would get there and he would be ahead of his peers. The technicians we were producing, and then the engineers and graduate type people. So now that is very important, because if you're talking about economic development, that is the tip of the spear. Those are your well-trained people who are at the front creating the pathway. And as they move ahead in life, they are drawing the lesser talented and the lesser able people, and the market absorbs more and more labor. So that is the philosophy you've got to understand. Then on top of that, if you look, for instance, at how the universities in the US have been doing, that the professors and their students, when they are studying and researching, they are studying something that is going to go and start a business and be a company. And in doing that, Stanford and others, MIT and so on, have created, if you take their graduates as a totality, the economy they've created is bigger than the economy of South Africa, one university at a time. So when you start to look at Korea, South Korea, you look at Ethiopia even, when they do a project, that project is for training youth. It is for research to learn more about that, so that there's more knowledge and more intellectual capital created. So the CSIR and the universities of these countries that I'm mentioning are integrally involved in the day-to-day work to create more.
What about the South African context? What is the role and the track record of South Africans' institutions of higher learning when it comes to producing exactly that and boosting the economy? Given that if we look at what's happening at our TVET colleges, you have graduates who are not employed. And this was something that was touched on at the summit, but why does that situation even arise?
This situation arises because we think piecemeal. I mean, I was looking at the report now, some of the headlines that we have 70 strategies that came out of the summit. That actually shows you that we are now at a stage of maximum confusion. When you have a problem of unemployment and you come with 70 strategies, How many hands do you have? What are you going to focus on? So that system of, UJ, I was shocked. I went to speak to the top achievers at UJ, School of Engineering alone, 10,000 students in the School of Engineering alone. What is this province doing to tap into that brain power that is concentrated next door here? So our universities, our municipalities, our provincial governments and national government are not using these universities and these learning institutions to unleash innovation, to unleash productivity. We're not there. And Thabo Mbeki has admitted this in public.
But there are other issues that we very seldom talk about, and it speaks to how our institutions are set up, how legislation is set up. For example, I was speaking to someone last week about intellectual property.
Yes.
And the fact that they were going to leave the higher institution in South Africa to go overseas, because if they come out with this particular innovative idea, which is a great idea, they cannot own the intellectual property themselves as the person who came up with that creative idea, because the institution then owns it. And is this not part of the problem, whereby we haven't looked at some of the legislation that governs our creativity and how to propel people?
Yeah, that is a big problem all over the country. I was once a counselor of the National Film and Video Foundation. When you talk about even the people in your space, the TV space, who come up with shows and so on, the incomes they could have earned from copyright and so on just dissipate. So in the US, for instance, if you are working in a university such as Stanford, MIT, and so on, it's not just those two, by the way. The university itself is an investor, is a shareholder, and they want you to go to the market, and they want their students and their professors to be rich. And that is actually physically happening. So the long and short of this, and maybe let me just say this thing as bluntly as possible. If you are not unleashing your youth onto unemployment to actually deal with it, we are wasting time. If you look at all the nations, whether it's Singapore, Israel, and elsewhere, that have actually done something with unemployment and poverty, it is the youth themselves. So you must put maximum investment on the youth and tell them and direct them and lead them into entrepreneurship, innovation, productivity. The youth must lead the way.
In a sentence, how does the president get onto that track?
I think the president has got to change his mentality. He has got to allow people who have creativity and imagination, more especially young people, not big business. Young people, young entrepreneurs below the age of 40 are the ones who are supposed to lead this.
Well, Sandile Swana, thanks so much for coming through. Sandile Swana is a lecturer at the Wits School of Governance. And as usual, our lines are open, our communication lines, that is. So do tweet us and tell us what your views are. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have your 8 o'clock news.